Hi, everyone. Lori MacVittie, Distinguished Engineer and Chief Evangelist for F5. And I'm back again to talk about another item on the application delivery top 10 list. And I brought with me Ken Arora. Ken, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, folks. If you haven't heard me in one of these sessions before, my name is Ken Arora. I'm a distinguished engineer with the Office of CTO. Spent a lot of time working on Big IP, being an architect. Glad to be here.
Awesome. All right. I have selected, because you wanted it, uh, ADC07 to discuss today, which is incompatible delivery policies. So I think first you're going to have to explain what does that even mean, because it doesn't contain the word traffic or control or latency or any of the words we're used to hearing when it comes to application delivery. So what are we talking about? Why is this a challenge?
Well, I'm hopeful that some of the people listening here may be seeing some of the other sessions that I or Kunal or Joel or you have put together, and talking about the challenges that are all over the place about dealing with latency or trying to have the controls you need to steer traffic. There are all these things you need to do to handle modern today's applications. Um, I'm not going to go through that whole list, but they're much more diversity of application, diversity of needs, complicated environments with multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and and you need sophisticated tools that will understand and can work in this world. Those tools kind of exist. Those tools do exist in places, but the problem is that if you're living in a hybrid multi-cloud world, you want that policy to be consistent, right? That shows up in, or compatible across all these environments, and that's your challenge. The challenge is that, okay, yeah, I figured out how to make myself latency tolerant, and I figured out how to say that this client gets better service, and I did some programmability there, and maybe I've got UDP going because I got gaming going on, but I set all it up and it works perfectly on prem, or maybe work perfectly in AWS, and now all of a sudden I've got to run in Azure or go to a cloud provider or do something, and they're different. I mean, that's the fundamental problem. It's incompatible. My policy that I developed and I spent all this time tuning is now no longer compatible with the new environment I have to run in.
So it's about there's actually two parts to this, isn't there? I mean, the one is that the actual policy can't be reused, right? It's like
Mhm.
I wrote it in French, but the assignment was to do it in Italian, so now my policy is useless.
Sure.
And the other one is actually a lack of parity in capabilities of across different types of services, right? We
Yeah.
have basically delivery sprawl. We use ton of different point solutions, and they all have their own languages for policy, but they also have their own capabilities, correct?
You're right. Absolutely. There's inconsistencies, like I speak a different language, and then there are just incompatibilities, right? Like the thing, like if I go talk to an Inuit and they'll give me 17 words for snow, and then I go over to my I don't know, my friend in Mexico, and there's maybe one word for snow, and it's like, oh yeah, do we ever use that word? Oh yeah, so what's up on the mountain? And yeah, and so you don't even have you have incompleteness. It's like, this is how you handle wet snow versus dry snow. You being in Wisconsin, that probably is close to your heart, Lori.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Heart attack snow is different than ski snow is
Yeah.
different than, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, absolutely. But to your point, yes, you're absolutely right, Lori. That there's an issue of, I've got to translate, but then maybe I just don't have that capability. An example we talked about in one of the earlier sessions is maybe a good load balancing algorithm to optimize latency is to say, let me route this request to the server, to the GPU, to whatever that has the least number of pending requests at the moment. That's a capability. Now, if I look at, Big IP does it, sure, but AWS has that capability, but Azure doesn't. So now I'm hitting that scenario you talked about, which it isn't just that I have to change languages; it's that I can't express what I want. And just to say, I'm not trying to rag on Azure. Azure has some capabilities like DSR that AWS doesn't, and you've got these incomplete holes.
Right, and they need you either you have to you standardize on one system and use that everywhere, which you can't really use AWS on-prem, but right, there are solutions you could do that with, or you really have to tailor where you're putting your applications and the delivery policies to the capabilities you have, which takes a lot more time. It's possible. but
Right.
it's very difficult because you have to match exactly what's going on.
You have to match exactly, and sometimes, like you talked about, you don't have that ability to match, and then you're put in the difficult decision of, well, do I then lose the capability or do I migrate to another environment? This happens with acquisitions all the time. An acquisition maybe did everything in GCP and we want to move them to AWS. But there's a capability that only maybe they picked GCP because there's a capability that only exists there. And now, are we going to lose that capability, or how are we going to deal with that? And and that's acquisitions are another. Go into new geographies or legal compliance channel. Right, laws change. Now all of a
Mhm.
sudden you've got to do something. How do you deal with that?
Yeah,
Um,
it's a significant challenge, right? Just trying to get a handle on this, and people may not be aware of it. That's why it's on the list. Is hey, you need to check these because this may be a reason why you have to stay in one location or get out of a location or change some policies, change some solutions.
Yeah. So the impact to recap, right, is sometimes it's just dollars. It's like, okay, I got to spend more dollars to somebody to translate, but sometimes it's just a loss of capability that you have to, and a loss of business agility that you're dealing with. Maybe it's a good time to talk about, well, what do we do about it, right? You talked about one of them, Lori, which is that maybe you could try to have something that's more consistent. Um, as a big IP person, I'll just say, right, as a big IP person, right, one of the value. Okay, so this is I'm not trying to sound too much like a vendor, but at Big IP, we are one of the value propositions, and this just comes to listen to customers, is say we are F5 as a company tries to be agnostic about where do you want to deploy it. You want to deploy it in the cloud, you want to deploy it in some cloud, you want to deploy it on-prem, you want on hybrid. That's okay. We will give you policy consistency. If I take a less F5 bias point of view, I might say at least have programmability so that when you don't have that native hardwired built-in capability, at least I can program it. And of course, we do those iRules, but maybe if you don't want to use big IP, you might want to use Nginx, you might want to use some other thing, but you need that programmability at least to cover that gap.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. And there are solutions including, right, just matching your apps and your policies with a specific cloud and kind of committing to it and going, well, right, that's the way it is. That's a solution. It's just maybe not the best solution. But we leave that up to the enterprises. We just give ideas here. But we are way over time, I'm being told, so I'm going to have to cut us off, but we'll be back again in the future to talk about more items on the list. And until then, yeah, check your delivery policies and see what's going on. Maybe there's some changes you could make, like getting rid of round robin. I'm gonna harp on that every time now.
All right. Thanks, Lori. This was fun.